Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Sunoikis Digital Classics Summer Term 2022. Today, we have our fourth session of this summer semester, Sommersemester in German at least, and this session is about ToposText and Wikidata. And I'm very happy that today our guest is Brady Kiesling from ToposText in Athens. And Brady has been developing ToposText, which is a wonderful tool for traveling in Greece with your mobile phone or your mobile device and reading, being able to find ancient places and to read sources about the places that you are visiting. And ToposText, according also to the description of the project, is an indexed collection of ancient text and mapped places, but more than that. So there is a lot of work behind ToposText. Today we will see how ToposText works and how data is produced in ToposText, because there is a lot of work behind. And this is the reason why today we also talk about Wikidata, because there is a very interesting connection between ToposText and Wikidata. As usual, you have a complete class outline in GitHub, a very interesting description of the project and the reasons behind the project, and then also an exercise, 3 different exercises with a complete description and resources. But I think that now we can start. So, Brady, thank you very much for your time today and for joining us for this session in Sunoikisis. And today in our StreamYard room, we also have Gabriel Bodar and Chiara Palladino for our discussion. I'm sure that our audience knows both of them because they are digital classicists and also very interested in this discussion about annotating places and ancient sources. Okay, so I think we can start. So, Brady, if you want, you can. Okay, excellent. So now we can also hear you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Berti. I'm honored to be here. The one thing I will apologize in advance for is I am much better at answering questions than I am in speaking to an audience that's invisible. I will urge you all to send your questions via the comments or any other way you can, because if you do that, then I will believe that you have something you would like to learn. And I have this terror of wasting people's time. So if you send me a question, I will be encouraged and enthusiastic and interesting. If you don't send me questions, I will get sullen and withdraw into myself and become completely useless. So anyway, that's my plea. But just to say a little bit about myself. I don't know if you can see these 2 objects I'm holding up. There's a pair of pliers and a hammer. My father loved good tools. He had an excellent collection of them. He knew where they were. He was determined always to have the right tool for every purpose, and he took great pleasure in finding those tools. I am, unfortunately, a very bad person. When I need to hammer something, if I have the hammer next to me, I will use it and it will do a good job, because that's what hammers are for driving nails into walls. When I do not have the hammer next to me, I will take the pair of pliers and use it as a hammer. And this is a terrible way to live, but I think I am not wrong in believing that most of us are more like that than they are like my father. So the goal in life is to have the tools you need so close to you that you have no excuse not to use the right ones. And that's what brought me to create ToposText. I have a strange background. I started out as an undergraduate at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, United States, studying ancient Greek, mostly by accident. I wanted to be a medieval studies person. The medieval historian was kind of awful, and but to read the footnotes in Latin texts, that were in Greek, you needed Greek. And it turns out by the time you've studied enough Greek to read Greek, you can't major in anything else because you've spent all your course hours doing Greek. In the time I wasn't doing Greek, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, a game which I think might still exist. Anyway, so I have a completely useless background. There were no computers in my life. I had the good luck of going on to Berkeley to study ancient history and Mediterranean archaeology. Did a master's in that, got tired of academics, and took the Foreign Service exam and was a diplomat for 20 years. In the process of being a diplomat, I learned to use an Excel spreadsheet and Word and the basic tools for getting certain jobs done. Not a lot. I quit the Foreign Service in 2003 and became an independent researcher, gradually moved back into archaeology, but I decided to live in Greece. And the Greek landscape has always captivated me. And the reason it's captivated me is every inch of it is somehow connected with history, with a deep culture going back 3,000 years or so. It's not just a beautiful landscape, but a meaningful landscape. And my question was how to have that meaning next to me at all times. So I had the thought, well, most of what adds meaning is these ancient Greek texts. And suddenly I looked around, and with the Perseus project, most of those texts were available online in English translation. And I realized if you hit, I think it's Control A for select all, Control C for copy, and Control V, you can paste a whole text into your own file. And then if you have an electronic device, you can carry that text with you. And this was great. I collected a bunch of texts and thought, I will take them up on the mountain with me and I will have them to read. And, it's like using a pair of pliers to pound in a nail. An e-reader with a pile of texts in it is pretty much useless. It's too hard. You do not use it. I then discovered that there was a huge Excel spreadsheet out there created by the Pleiades project that had taken this amazing map of the ancient Mediterranean, the Barrington Atlas of Greek and Roman antiquity, and digitized it, created a list of places with coordinates. And my great insight was to say, aha, this gives us a way of mapping places to where you are. We now have coordinates, we have place names. I will go through all of my texts and I will look for the place name, and wherever there's a place name, I'll stick the coordinates in and we will index it and have a tool that I can use to read ancient texts sitting on the mountaintop surrounded by piles of ancient stone. So that was the insight. And then we can talk about the development of ToposText. Maybe I will, let's just walk through the actual website. The app is much better. The app has and it's more fun to use because you basically press a little button at the bottom and it will zoom in to where you happen to be and show you the ancient places, and you just tap on them. But say here we are with the map of the ancient world, and ToposText covers, it's about 8,000 places now. Greece is mapped in much better precision than anywhere else. I try to be good with Sicily, with Asia Minor a little bit, but Greece is where I am, and Greece is what I care about most. So, but let's say you have a place you want to see what's been written about it. Now, if you type in a KNOS, if your internet is working, okay, there it is. Well, something has gone wrong, as it usually does. Okay. It will take you, zoom you in with great precision to the site of Knossos. And if you click on it, you will get an ancient antique polis at Knossos in Iraklio, Crete. And if you view it, you will find a modern description and a list of citations, in this case, quite a lot of citations describing Knossos in some detail. And if you are interested in a specific thing, you can go to look for one given author. Say, if you want to know what Apollonius says about Knossos, there's one passage in Apollonius that you can read, and you can go to the full paragraph, and then you could go to the full text of Apollonius. More likely that's not what you're interested in, but you might be interested in mythology rather than history. And then this will reduce it to Homer and Bacchylides and Apollonius.
Brady, sorry for interrupting. Can you
yes.
zoom in a bit the page?
Sure.
Because in YouTube it's a bit small, so we can.
All right,
yeah.
Let's.
We every week we have this problem, of course. Because,
okay, sorry. Okay.
Okay, maybe.
Is this better?
Yes, I think it's enough. I don't know, Gabby, if you can see it or. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, and then I have another strange thing I've added, which is if you're interested in just a mention of the place, not of somebody from Knossos, you do place. If you're interested only in people from Knossos, you do person. And if you're interested in language, you can say, I want just Greek or I just want Latin. So it's got some filters that if you know what you are looking for, it will help you find information pretty quickly. Over time, we have, well, not we, I have stolen, borrowed, begged about 800 texts. And each text looks something like, we'll say, Professor Berti and I did a little bit of work together on Athenaeus. Rather, she did an enormous amount of work on Athenaeus, and I have done some work to make some alignments to Wikidata. So anyway, we have the whole text of Athenaeus in translation, and at the beginning there are a few things like the the canonical text service identification for it, the Wikidata ID for the work, the Trismegistos author work ID, and then a link to the Greek. I'm not sure where this Greek link will take us at the moment. I'm afraid to try, but as you're reading it, it begins with the paragraph number. Each paragraph, in Athenaeus not so much, but in historical texts, there will be an event date, which you can sometimes filter by, so that an event date of -1 says, I don't really know what this particular paragraph is talking about. But in some places in the text, it will be clear that, say, it's talking about the conquest of Alexander, and there you might see an event date of -300, 330 BC or something. You'll see a GR, which will take you usually off-site to the Greek text, ideally that paragraph. But the crucial thing is going through every place, essentially every place and every person that I have the strength for has an annotation. For example, Nicomedia here. If you click on the link, you'll get the you'll see where it is on the map. If you want to follow this in, you could click and go to the page for Nicomedia, but normally you don't want to. But then, I mean, if say you see there's Philadelphus of Ptolemais, I have no idea who he is, but somebody does. And if you click on him, you'll see that he's mentioned in the ToposText 800 text precisely once, I'm sorry to say, so he's not much help, but he does have a Wikidata ID, and his only claim to fame is he's in the Deipnosophistae. But there are many characters who are much more interesting than that. And for example, if you're interested in the philosopher Chrysippus, you will have many entries for him, 272 to be precise, and you can filter them in various ways. So that's anyway, this is a tool that helps people find the primary sources for people and places. And I think that it's a big enough collection of ancient texts all in one place, all searchable at once, that it's useful to students. Once I had created this text, I started thinking of ways to make it more useful. And the thing I'm proudest of, actually, is the proximity search tool. It's very primitive now, and there are much fancier ways to do the same thing. But if you are interested in Hannibal and his elephants, you can search the entire ToposText corpus. And if you are lucky, you will find all of the important examples in ancient literature of Hannibal and his elephants. And then you can click to go to Polybius's history and read about that. And I envisioned this as a tool for students who are forced to write a paper on some subject and who would like to actually do their own independent research rather than go to the encyclopedia first thing and say, figure out what they're supposed to think. This allows people to go and say, oh, well, this is what the ancient authors say, and this is what I think about the ancient authors. So anyway, that was my goal in doing this, and I'm pleased with it. So where's ToposText going now? Well, actually, let me go back a minute. How did all this happen? And the answer is badly. Um, I ended up creating these texts by, let's see if I can zoom in a bit further. No, maybe not. Well, you probably cannot read this. This is the text of the geography of Strabo in the form that I've created it. It is a very simple pseudo XML with my own, private system of tags. Each paragraph has a work identity, a paragraph identity, a work date, that is the approximate date the text was written, and the event date, which is -1 in this case because there's no specific time period involved. But what I did to start with was to take all of the place names I could find in Pleiades and then do a series of modest transformations of them to have both a Greek-looking version of the name and a Latin-looking version of the name, and another set of transformations. So, say where you had Miletus, I would create Milesian. Just a huge list of search terms, and a friend wrote a script that would crawl through every text I had accumulated, and wherever it saw the word Milesian, it would add the Miletus tag that I had created for it. And we can talk about the tags I used, but if you're interested at some point. The first thing to realize is that if this were easy, someone would have done this a long time ago. In fact, the Perseus project did some of it, but the difficulty is there are too many places with similar names. You have to disambiguate them somehow, mostly by hand. And so my tagging script, as it searched through, whenever there was a name that had 2 or more possible places, it would flag it with an ambiguous tag, and then I'd go through by hand and fix all of those. A huge amount of time and effort. If I'd known how much time and effort, I never would have done it, but I'm now glad that I did. But there was no high tech involved, just a very simple search script. I then did something similar with personal names, starting out just by crawling through all of my texts and finding every capitalized name that was neither an ordinary word nor everything capitalized that wasn't in a standard vocabulary. And then counting the number of times the word appeared. So Eratosthenes, that name appeared enough times that it seemed worth tagging. And originally I just created these very simple arbitrary tags so that every Eratosthenes had the same tag, and then created an index for them. As we will discuss in a little bit, I have gradually moved to something designed to make those tags actually useful. Turns out there's more than one Homer, for example, but there's one Homer that everyone is interested in. And to make sure that I specified the Homer in a useful way, I looked for universal identifiers and found that Wikidata, the structured data underpinnings of Wikipedia, offered a unique number for everybody I was likely to need to tag. And so I started replacing my arbitrary tags with Wikidata identities. And this again has been a huge task. but it's a good way to spend many happy hours, especially when you're in COVID lockdown. And so at the moment, there are about 17 million words worth of text, and probably 300,000 odd place tags, 500,000 person tags. And over time, the person tags have gotten a little bit more Baroque, in the sense that I realized I'm not interested just in persons. I'm interested in ideas, and especially religious concepts. So, for example, I really like the religious epithets, and say Xenios, which is the epithet of Zeus of hospitality. I've gone through and tagged all of those in the process, making sure, creating, if one did not already exist, a Wikidata ID. Xenios Zeus, he definitely existed already, but others I've codified. And so finding a number of examples of Xenioses, which will be useful, I hope, to some person someday. And for me, it's been a pleasant treasure hunt. Now we come to the hard part, which is I've created a whole bunch of structured data, but it's not linked data. It's not really that open. And how do you make it data that other people can use? And I've, in collaboration with some very bright people, particularly, the Pelagius project, I was gradually introduced to some of the tools for making data shareable. I haven't really implemented most of them. I've done easy things. For example, all of my places can now be downloaded as a Google Earth file, or as a file in the linked open data gazetteer format, that's in World Historical Gazetteer format, that can be slurped up by other software. I've got my list of works in the form of reasonably structured, not perfect metadata, which people can borrow. I'm figuring out how to go ahead and make the actual texts available in a more useful form. And the logical thing to do is replace my very amateur pseudo XML. I mean, these random tags I basically invented, with properly structured XML, TEI, the text encoding initiative format, so that they will be conventionally machine readable, make them downloadable, make them shareable. On a temporary basis, the structure of this website is such that if you know about APIs, you can make an API call on this website and say, for example, if you know the CTS, the canonical text service code for something, and the line or paragraph number, you could send in a call, and it will send you the text of the paragraph as in JSON format. I don't think anyone's used this yet, since I don't really know how to format JSON myself either on the fly, but it's out there, and it's an expression of goodwill at the moment, rather than a useful tool that anyone can use. So anyway, that's what ToposText is about. I hope you will download it because it's free. It's large, but it's it's pretty straightforward. Because it covers more than just Greece, you may find that wherever you are, not so much Germany, I'm sorry to say, but many places, there are antiquities that are mentioned and texts that are somewhat relevant to what people are doing. Now, the question is, how many I may have lost my, no.
Okay, maybe if you want to look for something, I just remove the screen for a second. So if you're
okay,
looking...
well, it's yeah,
okay.
it's all right. No, this is I seem to have. Okay, let's exit out of that. No, that doesn't want to. No. Okay, well, I'll have to I have to reopen some
Okay.
some things.
Do you want me to add to the stream your screen or not?
Well, the problem is I have it seems that I now have a separate separate tab, separate Chrome window that I don't know how to access anymore. No, okay. So, well,
So
we
now,
will go ahead with
because now I see your Google page at least. Okay, I see your browser.
okay,
Yes,
well,
now probably this is what you wanted to show, Wikidata.
Well, actually, I wanted to show Wikidata, but I had some tabs already open, but they've become invisible. But anyway, let's go to and I thought
I have a Wikidata item. I didn't know that.
Well, yes, nobody does. Many of us have Wikidata items. And
okay.
Okay, can everyone see Professor Berti's Wikidata item?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you notice about it? It's got an English label, a Spanish label, an Italian label. It has no descriptions of any kind. It's got that she's human. It's got that she's female. It's got that her given name is Monica, that her family name is Berti. It gives a date of birth. I have no idea if that date of birth is correct, but it does have a reference. The Virtual International Authority file. So someone found in a bibliographic reference, possibly Library of Congress, possibly the American Academy in Rome, somewhere else. But what am I showing you? I am showing you that there is a piece of structured data that will allow anyone who wants to refer to Professor Berti in a completely unmistakable way as Q93222-371, or actually, to be more correct, wikidata.org/wiki/Q. And this will give you access to a certain amount of data about her, and more importantly, to a set of identifiers that will, with luck, link you to structured information about her. We could go, for example, to the Library of Congress, and it gives a contributor to some of her works. This is somewhat useful. And I see they have a closely matching concept from other schemes, including Wikidata. So what's really important to know here is this is an incomplete link. It doesn't say that she is a distinguished academic currently at Leipzig. It does not give the names of any of the books she has written directly. It doesn't say where she was born. There are many other things it could say about her. And some of those things might be interesting. But let's say why these things could be interesting. But on the other hand, while we're here, Professor, would you like to tell me your occupation? Are you a university professor?
Yes, you can write that at Leipzig University.
Okay, are you a university teacher? Do you prefer full professor or university teacher?
University teacher, let's say that.
University teacher, perfect. Okay, now you are much less ambiguous than you were before. I don't know if you want to put your birth location. Do you want to put, country of citizenship, that's interesting.
I'm Italian, so Italy.
What? Italian.
I'm Italian, Italy, originally.
Italy. Okay. So, anyway, we have just added 2 Wikidata statements. And anyway, I will not add a description of you because I find you transcend description, but someone might if they want to. The one thing that I should say is before you do this, you should get yourself signed on with a Wikidata ID, which will then serve as a Wikipedia ID. Some of you may have this already. So just to be fair to the world, when you make an edit, you will leave fingerprints on it that if you are being abusive about someone, they can track you down and say no. Otherwise, they have to just say this computer is bad if you do it without logging in. But now, why is this interesting? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to retrace my steps a bit here because I don't, I've lost some of my open tabs, but so we will go to docs. Query resources. All right, so here's a good query. If we would like to know every archaeological site that anyone has ever entered into Wikidata in the country Greece, along with both the Wikidata identity, the label, the description, what kind of site it is, the latitude and longitude, and what administrative area it's in, and if it has a ToposText ID. And then here's a series of statements in Sparkle query language, which is difficult but not that difficult for us to learn, and it is very easy to copy and paste queries. So having copied this query, we will go to query. We will paste in this query. We will hit, and the one interesting thing to note is I am asking it to provide labels. Auto language for me means English, but if not, which is EN, but if there's not a label in English, it will give you a label in Greek, which is EL, then in German, which is DE, then in Spanish, then in French, then in Finnish, because the Finns are busy in Greece, then in Italian, Latin, Catalan, Slovak, Bulgarian, Macedonian. So
can we zoom in?
Oh, sorry. Oh dear. Well, yes, we can. Yes, we can.
No problem. Wait for
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Is this better?
And
Yes.
sorry, just for our audience, Brad is using the Wikidata query service, but in the class outline, you have a link to this document where you have these examples of these queries, and the link is also in the chat. So for people following us, so if you feel lost, anyway, you have a complete description in the class outline and also examples of these queries. So. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Very good point. And there's an excellent tutorial about the Wikidata query service. But the point I want to leave you with is that it is possible to write a query that will find an unbelievable amount of information from Wikidata, and not just a thing, but where the thing is from, who it's described by, and sort of second generation queries as well. So here we end up with a list of 3,616 results for archaeological sites. Many of them are duplicates, and there are reasons for this, and the duplicates can be avoided if you know what you're doing, but I'm afraid I'm not very good at that. So what we will do is we will download this table as a CSV file. And I warn you that there's a very bad thing about CSV files, which is that Excel, at least on my computer, wants to open them. And it does a very bad job of opening them because it doesn't understand the encoding and messes it up. Wikidata uses UTF-8. Excel will use all kinds of weird things, and so various characters will get wrong. But you do not have to use the Excel version. Just close that, and you don't save it. But now we will go to Google Earth. I hope you all have Google Earth because it's a wonderful free program. If you don't have Google Earth but have another GIS system, that's also great. And we're going to import this data with import. And we are going to look for this query here, which is the most recent one, query 18. And we are going to hit open. And it is comma delineated, delimited, comma, text encoding UTF-8. And you look at the preview, it looks okay.
We still see the query in Wikidata. Okay, here.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. I will try to fix that if I can.
Now I can see, yes, the import of Google Earth. Yes.
Okay, but you can see the import of Google Earth, but you're not seeing the screen of Google Earth. Oh, I see it. It won't let me do that yet. Okay, well, here is the import feature. It correctly recognizes that latitude and longitude are latitude and longitude. We go to finish. And it will give us a message saying there are too many features, and we will. Does it want all of them? Yes, we will say all of them. It doesn't like it when there are more than 2,000. It says, do you want to apply a style template? And you say yes, and you create a new template, and you want to set the name, and the name will be the item label, and the color. Let's set the color from the field of entity label. I hope it works. It probably won't, but there are too many different entity labels, so it won't map the colors quite right. But and then we will just hit OK, and we will then save it. And Now, can you see?
Yes, yes, now we can see Google Earth.
Okay, and so now our query exists as a Wikidata file, and if we click there to show it, oh no, it didn't do the colors right, but such is life. But each of these dots is now an archaeological site in Greece. And unfortunately, in many cases, you will see that there are many different archaeological sites for Greece because, or rather, one site has multiple coordinates, or there are other issues. But still, you can see at a glance that there's a lot of information here. And then when you go to each of these places in Google Earth, there you can then go back to the Wikidata ID for it, item for it, the Mataranga Tholos, a prehistoric tomb site in Thessaly. Now, so just as an example of how quickly and easily you can take information from Wikidata and display it in other forms and share it in other forms, and you still have your data table that you can reuse for many purposes. And I'm going to show you another interesting query I did a few minutes ago before this started, and where I simply asked Wikidata to show me every ancient work, every written work written in ancient Greek where there was an author's name and an author's birthplace. And this is a map of all of the birthplaces linked to the work. And so here's the anthology of Stobaeus, and as you can see, his birthplace is Stobi, in I think in northern Macedonia, and there just the idea that this data is free and open and accessible to everyone inspired me with the idea that ToposText should do the same. It should be as open and shared as possible. Obviously, Wikidata started out as an underpinning for Wikipedia, and most good Wikidata items include a Wikipedia article, or Wikipedia articles in multiple languages. Actually, let me see if I can show you that. Say, let's go to Gavdos, a random island, and it has, I can't believe it. It has no Wikipedia articles, but maybe let's say it does. But see, it has an image of this little island, coordinate locations, Google Knowledge Graphs. It has a Pleiades ID, a ToposText ID, a Trismegistos ID, and Wikipedia articles in German, Greek, English, Finnish, Italian, Polish, and Portuguese. So automatically just access to a lot of data. And a project I've worked on lately has been perhaps a somewhat silly one, but I've been mapping all of the monuments, the public monuments in Athens, the modern monuments. Someone had done a website where they had done most of the work, and I simply turned that website into Wikidata statements. And the good news about that is that you can create structured data. to say there is a, find every statue of Pericles in Greece, and soon you will be able to do that. You can find every statue to a person who's still alive in Greece. There's not many, I think, but ways you can craft an infinite number of queries. You can see at a glance what statues a given sculptor has produced. So I've been doing things like that. I won't say that all of it is useful, but it's definitely a way of. All right, I'll tell you what my real dream is. ToposText is a way of pointing people fairly effortlessly to ancient things. What I want is to point people fairly effortlessly at everything interesting around them. And the logical tool to do that is Wikidata, because Wikidata has so much information in it. Every mountain in Greece has a Wikidata item. Every modern monument in Athens now has Wikidata ID and set of coordinates. I'm working now to get funding for a project to create a little tack-on app that will query Wikidata, find what is near you, and if you point your telephone in a general direction, it will filter that information so it only shows you the Wikidata described objects in that direction, and it will automatically link you to whatever information Wikidata has linked to, usually just Wikipedia, but sometimes other resources. And it's a trivial thing to do technically once people have done the work of adding material to Wikidata. So anyway, that's where I've been going with this. I think I've spoken for far too long, and it's time to turn this over to people with questions, and then I would cheerfully tell you about how you raise money for crazy projects, which is not very much money and not very well, and only by starving yourself, but things of that sort. So.
Okay, so thank you very much for this session, and you mentioned many interesting things. So, and please, for our audience, I see that we have people on YouTube. Please ask your questions, any questions, so don't be shy. But well, starting just with Wikidata, yes, this is a wonderful resource. And for example, and thank you for showing my item. I don't have a Wikipedia page, but still, Wikidata has ingested also information about me, because I'm a professor. I am also a scholar publishing data in papers, and definitely something now is in Wikidata. And working with the ancient sources, I know that you can find many interesting pieces of information, for example, about ancient authors. They don't have a Wikipedia page, as you mentioned before, for other places, but in Wikidata, you find a lot of things, including forms in the original language. For example, I'm interested in ancient Greek, and you can find there more ancient Greek than in other philological resources. So, and definitely Wikidata is wonderful, and you have shown us really very interesting examples. And then again, so for our audience, of course, ToposText is wonderful because you don't have to sit in your room and use it, but it was meant to be used while walking, hiking, biking, driving in Greece and exploring ancient Greece. And then you can use ToposText to find sources, to find maps and everything. And the interesting thing you mentioned at the beginning, you can use ToposText if you know what you're looking for. Yes, but also if you don't know what you're looking for, in the sense that, okay, you know that you want to read a text, you already know. On the other side, you can just ask for text about Hannibal and elephants, and then you will discover many interesting things. And this is also how we can use Wikidata. We can look for something we already know, but at the same time we can find many new interesting things for our work or also our pleasure. So, but maybe we can start the discussion in in our panel. I don't know, Gabriel, Chiara, if you have questions or, yeah. So thank you, Brady. It was really great. So.
Thank you.
And then, of course, that's it. So please use ToposText on your mobile phone, or your mobile device, because that's this is at least the original goal. And another thing, maybe I can add, yes, the idea to combine different data. And thank you for mentioning my work on Athenaeus. And yes, I provided you with some data that I produced, digitized indices, and then you gave me back a lot of Wikidata items, and now I have a map of the places of Athenaeus. So this is the way we want to work. So to exchange data that we start creating for different purposes, and then to work concretely. So you also show really concrete problems when working with this data. Starting also with your private tags. Well, this is what we do. This every one of us has been experimenting with this problem for analyzing our text and so on. Okay, but maybe, I don't know if we want to say something, and then...
I mean, I can start if there are no questions from YouTube
please.
and from the rest of the audience. Actually, I do
Sorry,
have
I'm having
a
cat fight here. Just a second. One cat in lap, other cat jealous, but okay, it's better now.
Okay, I do have some questions, actually a lot of questions, but I'm going to limit myself to the most urgent. So actually, thank you so much for the presentation. I knew about ToposText and actually use ToposText all the time. I may have stolen a couple of texts from you for workshops and annotation and everything. So thank you for that. And also, as Monica was saying, thank you for also, clarifying all of the manual work that gets into this, because people are sometimes surprised to learn that it's not just about, the magic box where you put the text and it gives you an output and then everything is magically there and you have your pretty website. Actually, the real work is like the philological work of disambiguation and tagging and everything, that there is no way really to sort out that it's not a human taking all the time to do all of the work, even in English texts, not even in ancient languages, even in English, that's sometimes very, very hard work, which actually brings me to, I don't know if it's a question or not, it's more maybe a compliment. This is a titanic work, annotating and disambiguating all of those names and making all of those annotations. So my question is, do you have somebody else who does that? Do you have a way to crowdsource it? And how can people participate? I mean, we're having a SunoikisisDC session, so maybe people want to know how they can help you.
Well, the short answer is I've had almost no help in the work of actually annotating. I had some brilliant help from Bruce Hartzler in writing my scripts originally, and Bruce is based in Athens. He was the computer guru of the Agora excavations. He now works for David Packard and the Packard Humanities Institute, doing amazing things. And I bought him a couple of beers, and he sat over his computer and pounded out some scripts. And if you know what to ask people, the world is full of people who can write good code, but you have to know how to ask them, and you also have to know what beer they drink. It's not an insoluble problem. And the best thing though that Bruce did was, at a certain stage, he said, I've done the basics. Now you have to learn to write a little bit of code yourself, essentially to tweak the code as ToposText evolved. And that has changed my life, because with a little tiny bit of coding, you can take any string of letters and turn it into any other string of letters, reformat things quickly and efficiently. And anyways, I do tell everyone, learn basic regular expressions. It's like the wildcards in Word. If you can do regular expressions, you can take any piece of hopeless trash and turn it into structured data. Not quite any, but most. I mean, you can take your dissertation as a Word file and turn it into a spreadsheet. I have done this with people's dissertations, and it's about 3 hours work once you know what you're doing, and you can transform a dead piece of paper into real vibrant data that can be shared and used. But yes, it's a huge amount of work. I would love to find people to help me. Unfortunately, many of us in this profession are just total lone wolf, solitary people who go into our, who are not smart enough when we don't have the hammer lying there. It's not even a matter of getting up and looking for it, but we could say, excuse me, person next to you, do you have a hammer I could borrow? And taking that step, if you can do that, that's really good. So I'm very bad at asking for help, and also I'm very bad at explaining what I'm trying to do. But all of my texts are full of mistakes. And if I were a proper academic, ToposText could not have happened, because we are terrified as academics to make any mistakes, because somebody will say, aha, you have the wrong naxos there. I have the wrong naxos all over the place. And it doesn't make ToposText less useful that there are a few mistakes in it. In fact, the mistakes are what engage people most. I spend hours going down rat holes when I find a mistake, and I always do, following it to try to fix it, discovering that leads me to 6 other issues, not all of which are mistakes, but some of which are interesting scholarly questions that should be solved, but probably not by me.
Well, I think you mentioned two fundamental things. We are alone, even if we are in this global interconnected world, for various reasons that you already mentioned, also because we are not able to ask for help, or at least because we want to solve the problems. This is another part. But this is true. And then mistakes. Well, yes, you're right, of course. But this is something that we have been learning a lot while working in the digital humanities. Of course, mistakes. We have mistakes also in the printed world, so this is the big illusion. But today, with digital data, definitely we have more mistakes. But because the technology is there, we still need to create data. And that's the thing, to learn to face mistakes. I know that personally. Of course, working in the academic world is even more difficult, because you need to produce good data, etc., for being evaluated and so on. But this is something we have to learn to go on. So, so thank you for mentioning this, because also because the data that you have been using and were produced in academic places have mistakes originally. So your mistakes are inherited from other mistakes. So, I mean, we know that. We know this very well, and there are various reasons. Also because we have more data to deal with. For example, you showed your text with all these tags and the problem of disambiguating, but it's a huge amount of work that we don't have, for example, in printed editions. So it's impossible to manage all these things, and we have to experiment. So thank you for mentioning this, because this is something that we have to face and to learn how to face it, how to deal with. So, yes. And yeah. So, Chiara, I don't know if I know that you have many questions, but please, if you want to ask other questions or other comments. I see that our audience is maybe shy, but I know that I'm sure that there are many other questions.
I mean, I can just say one funny thing. I was playing with ToposText as you were speaking, and I got into a kind of a funny thing. Maybe it's absolutely not a mistake. It's just a funny thing. I saw that there are annotations of animals in Pausanias. I found an entry for the wild boar, and then I found bees and everything. There is everything. There is the Wikidata identifier, there is a little description, and then there are all the places where all the citations in Pausanias' text. I think it's only Pausanias where those instances are mentioned. I don't know if it was, I mean, it's not exactly the type of thing that I would expect to find in ToposText. So I guess my question is, do you have a plan to or do you want in the future to start annotating other things that are not just necessarily places and people?
Pausanias is somewhat unrepresentative because I became involved in a project with Elton Barker and Anna Foka, based now out of Uppsala University, trying to densely tag Pausanias using Recogito, this very nice annotation platform, not only tagging entities such as people, places, events, but also drawing relations between entities, and so that my dream is we tag all of these places and people and events and concepts with their Wikidata tags, and then with the relation feature, and then use those to export Wikidata statements, which we then upload. And each Wikidata statement, Pausanias reports that Theseus killed the Minotaur. There's a relation, Theseus, who's Q something or other, Minotaur something, Q something else, killed, and we can then upload that with a reference, Pausanias, description of Greece, paragraph such and such, and you can automate that fairly well. So one day, all of Pausanias will be a series of data statements of that kind. And for that reason, I started out from the beginning annotating cats, because I like cats and the cats are on my lap and find it, it's impossible to avoid thinking about cats. But other things, as they seem to be topical, I'll just go through at a certain point, say, oh, here's an interesting concept, and I will find the Wikidata identity for it, and then search through all of my texts and add a tag for that specific thing. Anything that anyone's interested in, I will cheerfully create a wiki, create a tag for it. Just let me know.
Yes, and of course you can see here the amount of data that you can generate, and more than mistakes, we can say ambiguities, because definitely when you start annotating all these things and ingesting external resources like Wikidata, this is the problem, but also the opportunity. But Gaby, maybe you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just to finish that point, I mean, I think more than mistakes, what we're talking about is work in progress, right? I mean, there are going to be bits that are incomplete. There are going to be, so I think I wouldn't ever complain, oh, this is full of mistakes, it's useless. It's just, it's not finished yet, because, it's really useful that he made it available before it was finished, because otherwise we'd be waiting another 10 years before anyone would give us it. So, and actually, let's face it, a lot more than 10 years, right, for it to be finished. But no, I sort of wanted to ask a slightly more open-ended question, which was, I was struck by what you said. You alluded to here, and you also said in the description of the session that if there were some things you've known when you started that you know now, you might never have started, and it might never have happened. And I think on the one hand that would be a shame. Obviously, that would be a great shame. Not only because it's really good that this has happened, and in many ways that it's happened the way it has happened, but also because I think I hope at least that the field of digital humanities and the field of work around linked open data and geographical annotation and so forth has processes and workflows for making it possible to do things, not just expectations for making it impossible to do things without full resources. And so I'd like to sort of rephrase, recast that comment about, in some ways it was good that I didn't know how horrifyingly big a task this was and things like that, to more of a question of, what might you do differently? And this is in a sense, this is a question on behalf of students or junior scholars who might be about to start a project. But what might you do differently? What tools are there available now that might have saved you time or might have enabled you to do things differently or better? What relationships with people, what communities do you now know about? What sorts of collaboration would you make sure you had before you started, or would be one way of moving forward? I mean, you talked about being able to ask somebody for a hammer and that sort of thing, which I think this is extremely important. I don't think any project I've ever done in my career I would have done without knowing who to collaborate with. So those sorts of things I think are really important. But just generally, sort of lessons for a project of this sort of size. It's not so much about complain or criticizing what went wrong, but learning from things and thinking about what you do differently now, if that's not too open-ended a question.
Well, the first mistake I made was not realizing that there are some very nice, XML type data formats that I produced standard answers to the questions I had. And if I had done that homework, it would have aligned better. A second thing was that, especially for people, if I had understood that Wikidata identities existed, and if I had known how to search Wikidata, I would have started with those IDs from the outset. It would have saved me a huge amount of time, even with the knowledge that disambiguation would always be a nightmare. At least I would have had a much better focus on how that worked. In my defense, Wikidata was still in its early stages when I started 2012, 2013, but still it would have focused me much better.
Even 5 or 6 years ago, people were talking about other things like Wikipedia as being more useful than Wikidata, and so it was it would have been very hard to get everything right at that point.
Also, an interesting point about tagging. I created my very specific ToposText place tags because I needed to do manual disambiguation, and I had this clever idea that if I use the truncated coordinates as the first part of the ID, I could see at a glance where something was. Anyway, I structured it so there were 6 digits at the beginning, which were latitude and longitude, then one capital letter saying what type of site it was, a settlement, a sanctuary, a mountain, things like that, and then 3 letters with the beginning of the name. And this was done so I could manually go through and clean up tags. But it turned out to be overkill. It probably would have worked just as well to have used Pleiades identifiers from the outset, simply recognizing that if it starts with a 5, it's probably Greece. If it starts with a 4, it's probably further west, things like that. But I made some things more complicated than they needed to be. I also thought I did not realize how far I was going to go. So I threw out some data at the beginning that I then had to go and claw back desperately. Never throw away any data that you have. You don't have to display it, but keep it. And realizing that, I use Excel spreadsheets rather than fancy databases to maintain most things, because Excel is easy, and with a few little tools, you know, VLOOKUP and pivot tables, you can pretend you have a database pretty well. But there are a lot of things I could have done more intelligently when I started. I just wasted a lot of time reformatting things that never needed to be reformatted. You just output them differently.
Yeah, I was, I mean, I'm reminded a bit in some of what you say here by a comment that the late Elaine Matthews said a few years ago about the Lexicon of Greek Personal Names, which is a digital project similar to this. It's it's been collecting vast amounts of data in various different formats for 50 years now. The project started in 1972. And she said, we didn't try to be cutting edge. We always followed where it came to technology rather than trying to lead. And that's why, the project managed to last as long as it did, because, we never found ourselves with an obsolete technology that we weren't happy to just, discard and move on to something else, because the data was primary, not the format. And I think that was a really important lesson. And I think that sort of, that echoes some of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you have data that's organized in any reasonable way at all, you can always reorganize it to do what you need to do. But your interface is always going to change because there's always something better. I desperately want to fix my mapping interfaces, both in the app and the website, because they're not as good as they should be. But we have the problem. There were some beautiful map tiles from the Ancient World Mapping Center, which became unavailable. I think they're coming back. I hope they're coming back. But just technology destroyed a lot of good projects, or at least caused it to lose a lot of its utility unnecessarily. And one of my reasons for Wikidata is simply that I think it's probably going to survive, and the guts of it are going to be relatively consistent for the next 10 or 20 years. I mean, I hope that's the case.
And more importantly, it's so widely used that even if the entire Wikidata and the rest of the Wikimedia infrastructure disappeared, the URIs would still be meaningful because other people are using them.
Yeah.
And partly because you're using them. If I look for a Wikidata URI, among the things I will find are ToposText annotations, and that's already useful data that's not coming from Wikidata.
But I think that with your work and your presentation today, you have shown the data behind, even if these wonderful websites or visualizations or maps change or disappear. In any case, data are there, so they can survive more. And this is the work that we have to do, and you have shown that. So behind ToposText, we have data, and this data can be reused by other projects. And if you change the interface, I mean, still the data is there. And this is the important work. Of course, we need to visualize data. This is an essential component because we can also discover new things. But I think that your project in this case is a very good model for working concretely with data, producing data that can survive, definitely. Of course, Gabby, you mentioned the Lexicon of Greek Personal Names. This is a project with a structure before, because originally it was a printed project. In this case, with ToposText, we are beginning with many possible questions. Of course, you had and still have a goal, mapping ancient Greece and reading sources about places, but still, it was born as a digital project, so without, let's say, borders or limits. And as you are saying, so if you have questions, I can produce new data. So this is these new, let's say, we are in this situation today, so we don't have limits in some way.
Yeah, the fun thing about the Lexicon of Greek Personal Names is it was always a database. just in 1972, it was one of those databases that is in a shoebox filled with pieces of cardboard. I mean, but it was still a database, right, with structured data on. And it was digital very, very soon after.
Yes, exactly. They have a database and we can use it. I know because I'm using it, not only for names, but also for places. Of course, it started as a printed product, but today is a database and can be used and can be queried. If you have lemmatas of proper names, you can definitely query it and get results. And then hopefully in the future it will ingest new data produced, for example, by your work on ToposText.
Yeah, well, my goal is that everything I do should be aligned to the more scholarly, more formal databases. And what I'm hoping is that Wikidata can be an easy alignment tool for doing that, because you have the computer skills and the structured data to do very fast comparisons between Wikidata items and your own database, and essentially one day there will be a lexicon identity in Wikidata and vice versa. And then all of my stuff will just go directly to yours and without any intermediary.
Well, that's the goal. For example, for my very tiny projects, I'm trying to do that because I am annotating Athenaeus and other sources. I can use Wikidata because this is a knowledge base, a wonderful knowledge base with a lot of work done. And through Wikidata, I have to use Wikidata to get your IDs, ToposText IDs. But definitely the next step is quite easy. So definitely I can directly ingest your IDs. So this is something that is happening. And this is an academic project so financed by academic institutions. So step by step, also the academic world is ingesting. It's possible to do that. I mean, now we can get funds for this kind of work. So the difficult thing probably today is to evaluate this work. We know the problem, but we are learning how to do that. This is important for our students. How can we assess this kind of work? For example, when you query Wikidata, because building a query is not easy. So you need to think, to to ask questions. But this is definitely an extremely interesting exercise for students and also for scholars. But how can we assess this kind of work? How can we evaluate this kind of work? This is an open question. We are learning.
And of course, the real question is, how do we inspire people with the questions that force them to use our beautiful new tools? And I mean, I just tell everyone, come to Greece, because it'll automatically inspire you to be curious about the culture. But the same is true for Rome and the like. And but we need to just make it very easy for people to stumble across the tools for realizing they're interesting questions to ask and then asking those questions.
Yes, definitely. Of course, visiting places, archaeological sites, museums is a way for getting more people. And then maybe your data can be also used in museums. For example, we begin to see, I know that for Italy, for example, in museums, we begin to see QR codes for accessing digital data, and ToposText definitely could be an interesting resource. We know that for inscriptions, for example, when you visit, there are museums in Sicily also where they already have QR codes for specific objects, and then you can access different resources. And ToposText could be a great opportunity also for contextualize, for example, an object, and then read sources about that. So I hope that this can be true also maybe in Greece. I don't know that, because for the pandemic, I have been at home, so my last trip to Greece was 3 years ago, but still, maybe this is an opportunity.
Well, I'd like to turn your observation on its head a little bit. Yes, it is wonderful when museums are linking their objects to data, but I take the position that every beautiful object in a museum is something that has been pried out of its true landscape, which is its fine spot. And I want to put objects back in their fine spots, not physically, because that's you can't, it's not safe. But when you go walking through a field in Greece, if a beautiful statue was found there, your device should say, hey, here is a picture of the beautiful object found there, and you should go see it in the museum. And that's one of the things that I'm working on now, is how you find location coordinates, put them into Wikidata, and then access them properly. And it's not hard to do if museums take this project on board, because I think you need a two-way process from museums and the world outside that fills museums with objects.
Well, definitely, this is about adding. Sorry, I mute you just because there is some echo. Okay. More coordinates. We begin to have this metadata, so the place where a certain object was found and where is preserved, so to have both coordinates. We know that, for example, for inscriptions, for papyri in digital resources, now we begin to have these data. So this papyrus was found in a specific place and then now is preserved in a collection. And this is a way for allowing people to understand this. So to see the location, so the place where a certain object was found and where it's preserved. Not to speak of the history of a certain object which was found in a certain place and then moved to different collections when we have this data. But of course, in this case, definitely we need data from museums and collections. Yeah, original location, mention places, etc., etc. That's the thing, etc. So of course we can add really without limits. And this is the fascinating thing about the data we work with, no limits. Okay, so I think that we ask questions also for the audience. Definitely, this happens a lot in Sunoikisis. So, Brady, this is the first time for you in Sunoikisis. So many times we discuss in the panel, and so our audience follows us, and so we don't have questions. But I think that we really covered a lot. And I don't know if there are other comments because or other questions. No. Yes, please, if you want to say something, yes.
Well, if you can persuade any of your students to take a look at the exercise, if they have any questions or anything, please have them email me and I will cheerfully answer. Anyone can email me, and I will enthusiastically answer questions, especially if I think that you will do a little bit of work to improve Wikidata's description of the area around you.
Okay, yes, thank you for mentioning this. Again, in the class outline, you have a section with an exercise where you can experiment with Google Earth and Wikidata. Those instructions are perfect. You can follow them. And now with this video, you can also, you have another help. So please use it. And definitely my students will do that because they will work with this session. They will produce data, and I will email you also because I'm working, as you know, on different sources, and so definitely I will have many questions, and I will produce data. But thank you, really, thank you very much for your time in general, okay? And we need people like you for producing more data, so definitely. And I think this is one of the best exercises we have in Sunoikis, is because we have a complete instructions, and also you have a link to a Google Doc with the sample queries. Thank you for providing us with that, because we can learn how to produce queries, okay? And definitely, as you said, so you can really ask so many different questions and get many different data. Okay, so our time now is over. So again, thank you very much, Brady, for your time and for this wonderful session. Now we know more about ToposText, and definitely this is a project, as we were discussing at the beginning. So helping different communities, not only classicists interested in traveling in Greece, but also digital humanists and computer scientists interested in getting more data for very different purposes. Of course, focusing on historical sources, but still we need these data. Okay, as I mentioned, everything is in GitHub. So next week we don't have a session because it's holiday in Germany, but we will have a session in 2 weeks, and then we will change our topic a bit. We will have colleagues from Berlin talking about a project for working with Latin, the Machina Callida, how to again produce data for teaching Latin, for learning Latin. So again, our session now is over. Again, thank you again, Brady. This was really wonderful. Thank you, really. Thank you very much. And of course, let us know if we can help you. You email me for data for Atheneus, but definitely, so we are here if we can help each other. We don't have to be shy, but ask for help, as you mentioned at the beginning. So ask, we have to learn that. And okay, and thank you to the audience. Thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Gabby, for today, for the discussion, and see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.